what we would do is upload it to an automatic dialer that would go through these numbers, and we would dial 3 at a time. So we were speaking to like hundreds of people a day at the beginning. Eventually, we can kind of scale out of that, but we were able to scale out of that. But that's how we were able to find them, was by going to these lists.
Welcome to the Break Free Real Estate Podcast, your daily guide to financial freedom through real estate. I'm your host, Jocelyn Kaufman, and today I'm here with Jeffrey. And Jeffrey is an awesome investor. He's had so many accomplishments, and he seems fairly young. So I'm really excited to dive into your story. How are you doing today, Jeffrey?
Yeah, I'm doing really well. Can't complain. I appreciate you for having me, Jocelyn.
Yeah, for sure. Just out of curiosity, how old are you?
Yeah, I got started when I was 18, about 3 years ago, so I'm 21 now.
Nice. Good for you. I don't know many 21-year-olds that have, been able to have as much success as you have in real estate. So I think you're a perfect guest for the show. Do you want to start by just outlining like your where you're currently at today in real estate? You said you started 3 years ago. So what have you built up to in 3 years?
For sure. So my two brothers and I am a twin. I have another older brother as well, who's 24 now. We originally got started in real estate 3 years ago when we were I was a freshman, he was an upperclassman in college, and it was initially through wholesaling. So we'd read Rich Dad Poor Dad. We got on the podcast, like Bigger Pockets, and just YouTube videos, things like that, that were mainly just teaching us how to wholesale at first, and eventually we learned more about creative financing. So once we got our first deal, it took us about 6 months to land that first deal. A lot of cold calling, a lot of follow up, and kind of falling forward is how I like to describe it. Eventually, we closed on our first wholesale deal, and with the first deal and the profits that we made, we invested into a mastermind group that taught us how to do creative financing. So that was owner financing and subject to, and how we learned how to do that was through that group. So after that, that was about the first year. We ended up doing a little over 15 deals, mainly wholesaling, a lot of creative finance, and then we had one or two fix and flips at that point. So after that was when we learned how to. We started just really got interested in the apartment space, and we heard about syndication, which is when you pull together a group of people and they invest in a project of yours for some type of equity stake in it, and that it allows you to go and you know uh, take down larger projects because it's not just your money. You're able to leverage other people's money in order to buy those apartments, and they get a passive return, and it gets treated as a passive investment, which is why they do it. So that's what we started doing over the last 2 years, and sort of at this point, as I mentioned, the first year was about 15 plus deals, but we've been able to do a few multifamily deals now, 5 deals total at this point, all across the Southeast. And we look for apartments that have typically over 100 units, B class, 1980s vintage or newer. So to date, that's what we've been able to do and what we're looking to do moving forward.
That's awesome. I think syndication is something that a lot more people are getting into. It used to just be like a small handful of people did that,
Mm-hmm.
and I think a lot more people are realizing that that is an avenue that you can go down. Just out of curiosity, what percent? So, from my understanding, I've never done a syndication deal, but from my understanding, just for the listeners, you find a property that would make a good return.
Mm-hmm.
You go and you find a bunch of people to invest money, and you say, because I'm doing this work, I'm going to have 10% of this building or this business because I am doing all the work. And sometimes you don't even put any money down. Is that correct?
Yeah, you can structure it that way. I think it's very creative in the sense that not every deal is going to look the same. There's definitely industry standards or just common things that you'll see. So within syndication, primarily apartment syndication, a lot of times what type of split you can have is a 60-40 split, 70-30 split, a 50-50 split. I see the most common one I see is 70-30 or an 80-20 split. And when I say that, I just mean pretty much you're splitting the ownership between the LPs and the GPs. in between a certain amount. So it can be 70%. And the larger amount on my deals typically go to limited partners and a lot of my people in my network. That tends to be the same as well. And then on the other end of it, let's say 70% goes to the passive investor. We consider those limited partners because they're limited in the sense of how much active responsibility they have. On the other side of that, it's the active partners, which are my group, and then other people that are considered general partners, and they typically on my deals get 30 to 40% of it. So it's kind of like a total of 100%. You split that up into two main parts.
Yeah. So are you putting down 30% of the down payment, or are you not putting anything down?
So our group will typically put, obviously we invest in our own deals, and then outside of that, there is typically earnest money, and a lot of that is non-refundable, so that goes towards the purchase price. So the number amount varies, but we do typically co-invest with our investors. So I'd say the percent is anywhere on average at least 10%.
Cool. Awesome. I was just super curious. I'm sure our
Yeah,
listeners were curious too.
for
If
sure.
that's something you want to look into more, there's so much different knowledge out there. But I
Yeah,
mean, I would suggest if you do want to get into real estate, then do it with your own money before you are using other people's money. I don't
yeah,
know if you agree with that statement, but
yeah. I do. I do.
awesome. Okay, so let's what about like family? Do you have a wife or anything, or are you just single?
Yeah. So my brothers and I, fortunately, we got into real estate pretty young. So I mean, at that time, I've always been single and don't plan on having any wife anytime soon, just to focus on myself and my business. But my brothers and I, we try to stay busy on the business, and fortunately, I have two brothers that I work with, so it's almost like you know how they say business can be a marriage. That's kind of not in a weird way, but like we're always together. We are pretty much always masterminding or working on something, and if it's not in the business, then we're going to church and playing sports together. So try to just surround myself with good people, and fortunately my brothers I think are pretty good.
Yeah, I can't think of a better setup to be able to spend time with your family, and you're like
Yeah,
you're lifting each other up, and you're reaching this success together. That's so amazing. So good for you guys.
thank you. Yeah.
Uh, yeah. So let's talk about when you first got into real estate. So you were 18. Had you been researching about it, or like is it
hmm
something that you just happened upon? Tell me about that process.
yeah, so my older brother found it on YouTube. He was just watching videos at the time, and he came across one called it was by the Breakfast Club by a guy named Charlemagne the God is his name. So he had released a video of him sitting at it. Pretty much his show consists of him having guests on his show, and they'll talk around a table, a conference table, and we'll just have random conversations. And the guest on this episode in particular was a wholesaler investor, but talking about wholesaling on this episode. So we had never heard of it. He had never heard of it, my brother, and he immediately watched it. Once he did, it sparked his interest because that individual, his name was Mark Whitten, and he came from a lower income background. He was a minority, and we come from a low income background as well, or a low income background. We're Hispanic, so he was attracted to that in a sense that if that guy can do it, he thought maybe we could too. And eventually, we started just doing research on YouTube, and he kind of started sending us videos, and then I started listening to podcasts as well. But we didn't take action until a few months later when we were coming back from our trip from Guatemala. So that's where my mom is from originally. And I spent 3 weeks there. I read a lot of books. My older brother had listened to a lot of podcasts. And when we got back, we realized that we had an opportunity here in America that my family over there doesn't, in the sense of just starting a business and having resources and access to different things that a lot of entrepreneurs or people over there don't even have the option to do it. But here, I think a lot of entrepreneurs take it for granted. So once we got back, we just started taking massive action, and the main goal was to retire our mom, and it still is. But that was really what led the fire under us was coming back from that trip.
That's amazing. Like I have chills just listening to you talk about getting started. And I was a high school teacher originally before I got
Oh,
into real estate.
yeah.
And I just don't see that same drive in a lot of high school kids as I think there was when I was in high school, which I'm only 28, so it wasn't long ago.
hmm
But that's so exciting that you guys just took the initiative so young to really like strive for not only to better your lives, but your parents' life, your mom's life. That's amazing. So is wholesaling the first thing that you guys did?
Yeah, it was. And pretty quickly we started doing creative financing as well. And as I'm sure you know, it's a different tools in your tool belt is how a lot of our mentors described it to us. So once we learned how to wholesale, that was one exit strategy. And then after that, we quickly realized we were already speaking with the same sellers and people that needed some type of solution. So we just needed to find the right solution and learn how to actually apply that to different scenarios that we were facing.
Awesome. That's great. So what's the first property you guys just like bought?
Yeah.
Where you get, did you house hack? Did you kind of just have your own property, but then all invest in something?
Yeah. So I can talk about the first deal and then the first property we owned because
Sounds good.
wholesaling is like marketing, really, your
Mm-hmm.
sales and marketing company, which obviously has its own value. And I think it's awesome. You learn a lot from it. But at the end of the day, if you're just wholesaling, you're not really investing. So we learned that thankfully pretty early on where we were already talking to the sellers and the homeowners. And all we need to do is to learn how we can potentially solve their problem creatively, and that would allow us to start investing in these properties with little to no money. So the first deal was a wholesale deal where we just were speaking to a homeowner. We gave her an offer, and she didn't say yes at first. It took her maybe a week to call us back and asked us if we could be at this price. Would we be willing to move forward? We agreed on it, and we eventually closed on that. And that was the first deal we did. That was a list that we pulled from, I forget the website's name, but just pretty much going through and doing your normal process of pulling a list of data, cold calling for weeks, following up, building rapport, and then eventually just being really good with following up. And eventually we did close on that one. So that was the first wholesale deal. Now, the first investment property that we got, I want to say it was a few months after that. It wasn't that much further from or a long time after, but it was a creative financing deal. I'll try to remember exactly how we structured it, but the gist, I'll kind of give it high level.
Sounds good.
So it was the first one was a subject to deal where we keep the homeowner's mortgage in place and we take over the payments, but we don't actually put the mortgage in our name. It stays in their name and the title does transfer. So we call it a subject to the existing mortgage. Now,
Yeah.
once we actually closed on that one we actually had to put, I think we didn't come out of pocket at all. It was zero money down. Obviously, we just take over the loan. So they move out and we just start making those payments for him. And what we did on the back end to make it an investment property was we put a resident living in there who would cover the mortgage, and we actually cash flow a little bit on that. And then a few weeks after that, we actually did the same thing, but in this case, it was owned free and clear, so there was no mortgage. We like to call that an owner finance deal or a seller finance deal, where the owner is the bank, meaning we're paying them payments until we pay off whatever price we agree to. So if it's 100K over, let's say 30 years, that's like maybe $400, $500 a month, probably less than that, but it's a small amount. And we can rent that easily for, $600 to $700, $800. So the difference is what we kept in our pocket. And we actually sold one of those, I want to say a year ago, and one of them we still own. So that's how we got our
Awesome.
first two investment properties.
That's great. And just so in case the listeners don't know, so wholesaling, you're pretty much like a middleman. You get the property under contract at a good price, then you present it to a bunch of investors, and hopefully one of them buy it at the price you need, and then you get to keep the difference. So that's wholesaling. And then like Jeffrey's saying, it's not really investing. You're making probably some good money each deal that you
Mm-hmm.
do, but it's not, your money isn't going to appreciate over time, or you're not going to get cash flow on the money. It's a one-time payment. And then he was like, oh, I'm going to invest in, they actually bought a deal and did a subject to, which is awesome. And there are a ton of these deals out there right now because
Mm-hmm.
people are in mortgages they can't afford. And
Right.
so they just took over the mortgage, and the owner, it's beneficial to the owner because then they don't have to worry about making that payment every month. And then you did a seller financing deal. So you've done almost everything in 3 years at
Yeah.
the age of 21. That is awesome. Good for you. How did you find the owner that needed the subject to? How did you find them?
Yeah. Yeah, it was the same approach for all those deals where we would, and by we I mean my brothers, because I was the acquisitions guy where I was calling the follow-up leads and just building relationships with them and eventually giving them an offer. My other brothers focus on their strength. So one of my brothers was underwriting deals for us, which he still does today. My other brother was pulling list of data, and that we would use certain websites like Batch Leads and List Source. I think that's what the name of the website was. We'd pull a list, and by a list, it comes with a name and an address, but no phone number at first. So then what you do is you plug it into something we call skip tracing. It's some type of, it's, I don't know the exact software or whatever they use, but skip tracing is when you attach or look for a number that's attached to a name and an address. And once you have all of that, it'll spit out a list with all that you can upload. And we'd upload it into a dialer. That way we wouldn't have to hand dial, and it would take us forever if we did that. And instead, what we would do is upload it to an automatic dialer that would go through these numbers, and we would dial 3 at a time. So we were speaking to like hundreds of people a day at the beginning. Eventually, we can kind of scale out of that, but we were able to scale out of that. But that's how we were able to find them, was by going to these lists, and then you'd filter the lists by maybe some type of motivation or distress that an owner might be in, whether that's foreclosure or uh, absentee owner, landlord, things like that, that just might make it more likely that they would be willing to sell. Then that's how we were able to sort of filter the list that we pull.
That's awesome. So every time I get a call, just kidding. I
Not me
get
anymore.
letters all the time about my properties and people all the time. And I get it. Like, I get it because I'm always respectful and nice, but I'm like, I'm not going to sell.
Yeah. They're not looking to speak with typically like investors. Typically, well, some investors do sell, but typically like there's people that need the solution. Um, and I don't blame you. I still get calls too, even though I don't do it anymore. I try not to get upset too, because I was like, I used to be me. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I never did. Just kidding. That's, I mean, regardless though of what it is that you're going to do, you have to be willing to put in hours and hours and hours and hours, whether
Yeah.
real estate investing, whether you decide to go into wholesaling or you want to like figure out how to get yourself into a house like a duplex that maybe you can rent out the other side, or if you want to do something completely different from real estate, you have to work hard. And I think it sounds like you and your brothers have created a system where you each do what you're good at. You each have your own responsibilities. You're probably holding each other accountable, and it sounds like you're all working really hard. And um, that's awesome. Like just having surrounding yourself with people who are motivating you to do better. And I think a lot of people um, don't don't get that aspect of it. They either try to do it themselves or they are surrounded by people who are telling them that they can't do it or it's impossible. And so I think that's awesome that you all did it. That's so great. I love it.
Yeah, no, it's been definitely interesting, and I always try to remain grateful for my brothers, and also I try to surround myself with mentors and people that, regardless of what even place in my life it is, it can be my spiritual life or business life. In this case, we're talking business, but just trying to surround myself with people that I'd like to look up to in certain ways, and that doesn't even mean they have to be more successful in a certain aspect. It's just you can learn a lot from different people, but I do think by being aware and intentional with it, you're less likely to allow people that you may not want your close network in, because at the end of the day, like they always say, you're a sum of who you surround yourself with.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I've really enjoyed chatting with you, Jeffrey, and we're going to end with some questions. So,
Yeah,
first question, what is your biggest mistake? Have you had a mistake?
of course. Yeah. um I want to think of the biggest one. I have a few big ones, but I would say, um this is not, I don't have to go into too specific, because there's so many examples I could go into, but just truly understanding that, like, the money, a lot of people, especially when you're first getting started as an entrepreneur, it's hard to want to go after the money and sometimes pick money over a relationship. But I truly think if you can sort of become in tune with, for me, it's God, but whatever you want to say it is, for me, it's just understanding like, okay, I talk to God and say, is this something that I'm doing because, I want the money and like I'm willing to burn this bridge and maybe take a little bit extra change today versus just giving a little bit more up and sort of keeping a relationship intact and also just keeping it fruitful and sort of building it. A lot of times I've been put into situations where I kind of regretted taking the money. And it's not like I was taking a lot, but just small decisions. And obviously, as a young person and as young entrepreneurs that are listening to this, sometimes you don't even know what the right decision is. But I truly think that's why you have to be in tune with that inner voice inside that will let you know, which way you should go. So that's my first mistake. The second one is um, there's no really get rich quick things that will actually work, and especially online now, a lot of people try to sell you things. Um, for me, it was like different pump and dump coins. I thought on a few of them, like I was going to get rich off of them and ended up losing money on it. So I like to call those expensive seminars, because I did learn from it. But that's probably the two biggest mistakes that I can think of.
Yeah. I think greed gets a lot of people,
Yeah.
puts a lot of people in bad positions. And like when I got started in real estate, it wasn't about being a millionaire. Like that wasn't my goal. My goal was to be able to replace my income so that I could, spend more time with my friends and family. And um, instead of I think what you're trying to say is instead of thinking like of a dollar sign, like
Mhm.
have different reasons why you're doing it and it'll help
Yeah.
motivate you. That was great. Okay, I mean this might coincide with that, but what's one thing you wish you knew beforehand?
Yeah. I would say truly trying to build your network, because the way that we've been able to get into these apartment complex deals that we've bought has been based on who we knew. Obviously, it's easy to know that as a young person you're not going to know a lot. You're not I can't make that up, and I can try to change that by learning more, and I do, and I think anyone should. But at the end of the day, as long as you are also meeting people and trying to build relationships and bring value to people who then you can, maybe if you have a question, reach out to and get an answer from, that'll help you in all of the problems that you'll have moving forward, and it'll prevent you from failing. Also, it's really good because if you have some type of challenge or opportunity that you may be a little afraid to pursue because you don't know if you can handle it, sometimes it does take an extra nudge from someone who's more experienced and who's done it before, and you ask them, hey, what do you think? Should I do this? And I've done that multiple times on big deals that I was scared to do. And honestly, a lot of times I didn't think I could. I think any rational person that hadn't done it yet, especially where I was in my life, would have said no. Like, this is crazy. There's like almost no way you're going to do it, because I don't know how I would do it. Like, you try to think logically through it, and there's no real answer. But then you ask a mentor, and they say, I think you should go for it. You'll figure it out, and it gives you that extra leap of faith. And obviously, that's where my faith comes in too. But having someone else to talk to, it really helped.
Yeah, that's awesome. How did you go about building your network?
For me, it was going to the main thing has been joining mastermind groups that I did pay money for. That was the number one way. And then outside of that, it was by going to events locally and paying for conferences across the country that we'd fly to. That is expensive for sure. It can get expensive too. But also outside of that, you can connect with people on LinkedIn and Bigger Pockets, and that is for free. So those are the main four ways that we've done it.
Awesome. That's great. Um, and then last question, what is your favorite real estate book?
Ooh, favorite real estate book. I like the ABCs of real estate investing, and then outside of that one, Real Estate Investing 101. Those are two of my favorite ones for multifamily.
Awesome. How many, if you were to guess, how many books have you read about real estate?
About real estate, I'd say at least 10. I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but I
It
do read
sounds
a
like a
lot.
lot. That sounds like a lot to me. That's awesome.
Yeah, I like to read a lot. It's just not always real estate. I can listen to like podcasts for real estate, or one of my mastermind, or just talking to people, or just doing it. But outside of that, like mindset, financial books, economic books, things like that, I do like reading about.
Yeah, and I think it's important too for our listeners to realize that You don't have to only be learning about real estate. There's so much more that goes into it. Like living a healthy life is going to allow you to be more successful,
Mhm.
and learning communication skills, and um, being grateful and appreciative of your life. Like there's so many other things that go into being a
Yeah.
successful entrepreneur um, in anything. And so that's great. I love that you're learning about other things as well. And it's
Yeah.
probably a reason why you've been so successful, and why you just seem like you have a good head on your shoulders. And it's like, it makes me so proud to see someone like, I mean, you're not that much younger than me, but
Mm.
because I could have taught you in high school, and it makes me so
Mhm.
proud to see that some some younger kids are figuring it out and are willing to work, and not only like for the money, but for all these different things of how like it's beautiful. So it's
Thank
been
you. I
awesome
appreciate that.
talking to you. Yeah. Last question, where can people find you, Jeffrey?
Yeah. So my brother has done a great job with our different marketing platforms. First one is our website, www.donisinvestmentgroup.com. And then we have a podcast called The Real Estate Monopoly on all podcast aggregators. And then on social media, I'm at Jeffrey Donis. And then my brothers and I have an account on most platforms as well, including YouTube. It's at Donis Brothers.
Awesome. I will put all of that in the show notes. And it's been so awesome having you on the show, Jeffrey.
Yeah, likewise. I appreciate it, Jocelyn.
Yeah. That's it for today. For more daily investing tips and real estate secrets, don't forget to visit breakfreerealestate.com and make sure to like, subscribe, and share our podcast. We will see you tomorrow.